Yo, what is up YouTube? This is a quick tutorial about how to fake a real life image in less than 60 minutes. You can find yourself in a situation where you are presented with a bad picture, you miss a shot, or if you just want people to think you can dunk or maybe cooler than you actually are. In this case, we miss a shot. We have the player loading up and then coming down, but not an actual image of him throwing the ball through the hoop. So we're going to edit this image today. Hopefully by the end of the video, we will have successfully created the illusion of a rim rattling two-handed slam. These are the two images I'll be using. Now let's get started. Like every great deepfake project, our journey begins in Photoshop. I first start with the load up image, and my objective is to isolate the player and remove him from the background. If we have a good quality image such as this one, it's pretty easy. I go into the properties panel on the right side of the screen and click select subject. This is a great shortcut for images that have a noticeable depth, which is a fancy way to say the background is slightly blurry. I inverted my section and started tracing along the rightly selected portions of the player. After I've done that, I go back and manually remove sections that the auto select neglected to capture. Sometimes the auto selection will make an outline fuzzy or choppy, so I will go back and use my polygonal lasso tool and my clone stamp to replace what is missing to make the edges smooth. And you know, who doesn't want or need bigger biceps? Now that we have isolated our jump man, it is time to position him into the second image. We are trying to figure out a realistic angle for our player to be in if he was above the rim. I attempt to scale him so that both the numbers on his jersey are close in size. After I get the player into the right position, I duplicate that layer and make an all red variant. I lower the opacity of this layer, and this will serve as a guide to what needs to be covered up. Everything inside of the red we do not need to worry about, but everything on the outside of the red needs to be covered up as if nothing was there in the first place. This will be the longest task of the edit. You'll have to go section by section and try to remove pieces at a time. It helps if you know for sure what is actually behind the image. In this case, we are trying to build bleachers, so I can look around at the other bleachers and attempt to clone them to mask out our player. Now, as you can see on screen, I'm just going around and trying to get all of the easy parts out of the way, because when looking at this image, I know that it will be the most challenging to add the bleachers on the top and bottom sections. The main tool I use for doing all this would be the clone stamp. I use this in various feathering and sizes. A big tip I have for this would be to do just that. Adjusting your brush size for each section is a huge help. It's important that you keep all the angles consistent in the image, and adjusting your brush size so you aren't selecting too much at a time to copy can help you keep that consistency and further build the credibility of a fake image. It's sometimes easy to stress over small imperfections in our images when we are going through this step. Sometimes it's easier to look at a section you are struggling with after you finish all the other steps. A fresh and second opinion is always necessary when completing big projects, and I actually end up doing that in this video. Another thing to keep in mind is that this is just the base image. When furthering edits are applied, such as overlays, grain, and coloring, this will mask our change even more and enhance our edit even further. Also, don't be afraid to add things that weren't initially there. We all know that the player in the black jersey has two arms, but you cannot see that in the image we are covering up. So to build the background, I actually copied his other arm and placed it as if it was there the whole time. Doing small things like this can add to the realness of an image. Just always be sure to add and match shadows. And now I am copying a section of the bleachers and trying to put that behind both of our players. Make sure to match the size, color, and direction of the chairs and make it as least noticeable as possible. I am also adding some extra blur to the section and cutting it to fit. I added some additional shadows to try to blend it in as much as possible. Now it's time to create some depth by putting our player behind the basket. Where the glass and the backboard is, we will have some parts of the hand and ball showing, but where the foam is, we'll just take out altogether. To make it seem as if the ball is behind the backboard, I just took the eraser and lowered the opacity to make it seem hazy. And when it came to the square, I lowered the opacity slightly more because that part of the glass is tinted white. And now we have reached the most tedious part of this edit. I'll be putting his arm behind the net. What I did was I duplicated the base layer and roughly cut out the area of the net. I'll be putting this layer of the net over top of our player. Now, all that's left to do is to find the right amount that will go over the player's arm, and then I start cutting out each individual piece. This will take a while, but it's good to kind of take your time with this and make sure you limit the dark areas on the net, since this will be going over your player's arm, and this might even be a point of contention when you look to see if this image is real. So it's good to have this part right. So the whole goal of this is when it is in front of the arm, it looks as if the arm is completely behind the net. Now the last couple things I do is I added some shadows to his arm, the one with the sleeve, so it looks like it is under the backboard, and I start to make my final looks and adjustments. It's always important to look over your image thoroughly after you are done editing. I noticed that the back bleacher looked a little off, and in this case, I just copied the other section to match the original and kind of blended it in as best that I could. And now 52 minutes later, we have our completed image. We turn these two pictures into this.